As a combat engineer in the Marine Corps, it was my job to go out and try and find hidden improvised explosive devices, IEDs, those little bombs that the enemy like to put in the ground for us. And I had to do that using a handheld metal detector. Needless to say, it was a tough job. It was a dangerous job. It was a frightening job. But I loved it. I loved that job because it gave me this unique opportunity to protect my fellow Marines in a way that nobody else could. It gave me the opportunity to put my life on the line for them. And that is exactly what I joined the Marine Corps to do. I also got to blow things up, which is going to make any job a little bit better. So on July 22nd, 2010, my battalion, we were doing a push deep into Taliban territory, and my squad and I discovered an area that we were about 100% certain was going to have an IED in it. So I moved forward in order to do that job that I love doing so much. Got out my metal detector, unfolded it, turned it on, started waving it back and forth in front of me very slowly as I took these tiny, calculated steps. Left, right, step. Left, right, step. Left, right, step. In an instant, it was as if I had been teleported to a completely different dimension. All I could hear were my own piercing screams and this deafening ringing in my ears. All I could see was a blurry tunnel that led up to this beautiful, bright blue sky. All I could smell and taste was dust and this distinct chemical stench of a recent explosion. My legs felt like they had fallen asleep, except magnified by 100 times. Within seconds, my fellow Marines got to me. They put tourniquets on my legs to stop the bleeding. They gave me a shot of morphine for the pain. And after they did that, my mind and my body regained control of themselves, and I was able to start forming clear thoughts again. And those thoughts were centered around what my future was going to be like. Figured I could say goodbye to the Marine Corps. I was never going to set foot in a gym ever again. I saw myself being in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. I saw myself being taken care of by my mom like I was a baby for the rest of my life. And I didn't like what I saw at all. So I turned to these two Marines that had just finished saving my life, and I said, "Brother, I don't want to live like this. Just shoot me. Just kill me, man." Of course, they refused. But I kept asking. I asked everybody that walked by until finally they loaded me up onto a stretcher. They carried that stretcher to a tank. They put me in the back of that tank. They gave me another shot, and I went unconscious again. And I didn't wake up for 2 days. 48 hours later, I woke up on a hospital bed in Germany. It felt like I'd been asleep for 1,000 years. I could only lift my head about an inch up off the pillow. No matter how many times I blinked and rubbed my eyes, they wouldn't focus. And the room was spinning ever so slightly in a circle. But even though I was barely conscious, I had one vividly clear thought. And that was that my mom is going to be crushed when she hears the news about what happened to me. So I turned to my nurse, and I asked her to try and find me a funny or a stupid-looking hat or something that I could wear for when I got back to America. She looked back at me as if these were the words of a person that was incredibly high on morphine, which, fair enough, I was. But my drug-addled mind had a simple objective. I figured if the first time my mom saw me when I got back to America, if I was wearing a funny or a stupid-looking hat or something, she wouldn't be able to help but laugh. And in doing so, she'd make herself feel just a little bit better. Of course, they couldn't find a funny, stupid-looking hat in a trauma hospital in Afghanistan during the peak of the war. But 2 days later, when I got back to America, they unloaded me out of this giant ambulance at Bethesda Naval Hospital. There my mom was, with a pirate hat to give to me. So even though it wasn't in the original way that I had intended, my message got delivered. Mom, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay, Mom. And I spent the next week in the intensive care unit of the hospital, going in for surgery every day with more tubes coming out of my body than I had limbs, fighting off fevers, fighting off infections, hallucinating on all the pain medication and anesthesia they were pumping into my body. And I had a steady stream of visitors. And every single person that came into my room saw me with that hat on my head or on my bed or on my nightstand. And I could see in their eyes how much better it made them feel to see me with that hat. Because it told them their grandson's going to be okay. Their brother's going to be okay. Their friend, their fellow Marine is going to be okay. So, what changed? What changed between the guy that was in a blast crater in Afghanistan asking to be killed to the guy that was in a hospital bed 4 days later trying to make everybody else around him feel better? What changed that I went from being a person that had given up all responsibility for my life and for my future, and I turned into a person that was trying to find any tiny piece of ownership that I could find in a time where nobody would expect me to be looking for ownership. We get asked all the time, how do I take ownership of something that's completely out of my control? For example, when you've just sustained a life-changing tragedy. And what you can do is you can take ownership of how you respond. And that was literally the only thing that I could do. My body didn't work at that point, from the injury, from the pain, from the drugs. The only aspect of my life of which I could take ownership was my attitude. And because I did that, I was able to help the most important person in my life, my mom, get through the most traumatic experience of her life. And that act started a trend that lasted throughout the rest of my recovery, the rest of my journey, all the way up to right now. 2 weeks after I got out of the ICU, I found out about this competition called the Paralympic Games. And I saw an opportunity to become an athlete. So after a year and a half of recovery at Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C., I officially retired from the Marine Corps, and I started training for rowing. 9 months after that, I went to the 2012 Paralympic Games, where not only did I win a bronze medal in rowing, but even better, I met a beautiful girl named Pam, who somehow, a few years later, I was able to convince to be my wife. And she won gold at those Paralympics. She never lets me forget it either. She's incredible. And then in 2016, 6 years after my injury, I started noticing that the perception around veterans had been shifting over the last several years. From that of the noble hero to that of the broken hero. Seemed like every veteran character I saw in a movie or in a TV show or in a news story or even in a song, we were all constantly being portrayed as constantly on the cusp of implosion and haunted by what we had seen in war. And that didn't sit right with me because that didn't represent my story. It didn't represent the story of the vast majority of my friends. It didn't represent the story of the vast majority of veterans. And I didn't want me or my friends or any of my fellow veterans to be seen as victims. So I decided to take ownership of that problem. And I set out to change that perception back by creating my own story about a veteran that went overseas, experienced some of war's worst trauma, and came back and thrived from it and became stronger because of it instead of being destroyed by it. And my way of doing that was to run 31 marathons and 31 consecutive days and 31 different cities around the country. With a quick stop at Coronado. Oh. Thank you. With a quick stop at Coronado Island, where the SEALs do BUDS training, where I ran into this BUDS platoon. That remains to this day the only BUDS platoon to ever graduate with a 100% graduation rate. Nobody quit. Coincidence? I don't know. Ask Jocko. And by completing that month of marathons, I was able to turn what was the darkest moment of my entire life into a life that was more meaningful than I ever thought possible, even before my injury. Jocko and Leif have been up here this morning telling us to take ownership of our problems, take ownership of our lives. What I want to tell you to do is take ownership of your attitude, because attitude is the foundation of everything. If you don't start with the right attitude, then every action you take, every decision you make is going to lead you further and further away from where you need to be in life until eventually you're over here lost in the woods with no idea how to get home. Luckily, in order to take ownership of your attitude, you only have to ask yourself 2 simple questions and take 2 actions. The first is, what is the truth of my situation? The real truth. Then, accept that truth completely, 100%. Then ask yourself, how can I use my circumstances to help the people that I care about the most in my life? And then help them. You help them. Because the fact is, no matter how bad something that happens to you is, you are not the only one that is affected by it. You know what's worse than losing your legs above the knee? Having your child, who you love more than anything, lose theirs. There's not a parent in this room that wouldn't trade places with their child in an instant if something like this happened to them, or if they got sick, or if anything bad happened to them. So my injury, in the end, it was never about what happened to me. It was about what happened to my mom, to my dad, to my friends, to my family. And no matter what happens to you, there is always something that you can do to help the people that you care about. And that is the attitude that I'm talking about. I was in a hospital bed, high, hallucinating, eating through a tube, peeing into a bag, pooping into a bag, barely able to speak, barely conscious, barely even alive. And I was still able to find ownership and lead. That is the attitude I'm talking about. That no matter what happens to me, I am going to lead and I am going to help other people. And that is how, when you find yourself asking, how much more can I give? How many more times can I try? How much further can I go? How much longer can I last? You will answer, I can give a little more. I can try one more time. I can take one more step. I can last one more second. Not going to be easy. In fact, I'll tell you right now, it's going to be incredibly difficult. I didn't get into a whole lot of the details, but recovering from losing both your legs above the knee is hard. It's painful. It's demoralizing. Running 31 marathons in 31 days, also hard, believe it or not. So, it's going to be hard, and it's going to take time. There's no getting around that. But if you can do it, if you can get past the fear, get past the doubt, get past the uncertainty, get past your ego, you are likely to find yourself on the other side of whatever problem you're facing in life, saying to yourself the same thing I say to myself every day. And that is, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a single thing about what happened to me. In fact, I would do it all over again if it meant I got to end up where I am today with my family doing what I do. Not everybody's going to face something as extreme as losing both your legs above the knee. But every single person is going to face some sort of disruption to your life on a variety of different scales. You get fired, you get divorced, it rains when you're supposed to be doing something outside, and yeah, sometimes losing a limb or losing a loved one. And in each one of those circumstances, no matter how mundane or traumatic they are, the first thing you need to take ownership of is your attitude. Because that is how you turn anything that happens to you in your life into an opportunity to help people. And when you help people, you will find meaning. That not only can it change your world, it can change their world, it can change the entire world for the better. Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it.